Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Krashy, and today we're going to be tackling our Azumarill release tier list. Now, I've kind of consolidated my tier list quite a bit. I like to do solo queue tier list, but let me explain really quickly for anybody that may be catching on. Solo queue to me just means anything that's not 5-stack. That's duo queue, trio queue, and solo queue. And I just kind of dump it all in and I give my thoughts on each character. So I could break it up into lane, I could break it up into jungle, I could do a team tier list and a 5-stack tier list and a solo duo trio tier list, but I just kind of do it all consolidated. So let's go ahead and jump in. So Azumarill is here. There's been some slight changes. I always kind of look back at my past tier list and try to kind of see. There's been some slight changes as far as my opinions and literal changes, and let's go ahead and dive into it. So let's first start with the supports. I kind of just change up what class I start with. I'm going to go straight in with Hoopa. I think that Hoopa is actually one of the best supports and best solo queue picks that you could possibly have in the game. This character is like an attacker, kinda like does some really good damage, has really good self peel and shields, and shadow ball's great. But the thing is this character also has an amazing unite move. It's one of the most impactful unite moves in both competitive and solo queue. And even though your teammates have the option to not take it, I swear it feels like the button is just so tempting that if you're a good Hoopa placing good ults and using it at the right time, then you're probably getting decent value out of it at minimum, because your teammates are going to just press the button and show up. I think it's really, really solid. I think it really is. It's one of the better characters to just actually jump in and play solo queue with. And this is like for solo, duo, trio, but also just solo. Like I'll just pick Hoopa and play Hoopa solo, and it like I do really, really well. So definitely kind of my opinion. As for Mr. Mime, the thing with Mr. Mime is that like they nerfed confusion damage, which I didn't really feel was necessary, but Mime is still solid. I'm going to give it like A tier position because this character still does damage. It brings that niche to the table. It still is tanky, so it's like a pseudo support tank, but it like outside of that like kind of hybrid niche, it doesn't really do a ton, but it's really good still. It's got an amazing unite move, and that's really, really important. So if you're bringing like choice specs to the table with it, you can bring some damage. If you're going full tank, you can bring some score shield potential. Pretty decent in laning phase once you get that level 4 for confusion. But definitely not the best pick in the world, but a really solid. Should be definitely looked at as like a pillar for a strong laner, right? Someone that can do what this character can do. Eldegoss. Now, here's the thing with Eldegoss. This is where I want to explain, because it's the support defender list that needs the most explaining. If you're going in solo queue, Eldegoss, if you're playing like a full damage build, it's actually not bad. You can probably outperform most of your teammates. But Eldegoss is super solid in duo and trio queue, which again, solo queue tier list. Duo and trio queue, this character is essentially still as good as Hoopa is. Hoopa just has like kind of slightly shoved it out of the meta, but that doesn't mean that Eldegoss is any less like ridiculous, right? This character heals a ton, shields a ton, does crazy move speed things. It's so incredibly good. So if you're playing with a friend and you want to be a support player, that's the best time to do it, to be completely honest. And Wiggly is kind of the same thing. My A tiers are always stacked, so I'm gonna show this over. Wiggly is kind of the same thing. I would literally probably never play this character solo, but if you're duo queuing, having like a Wiggly on the team is great. Like it's so good to have that. The laning phase is amazing. Cute charm. And Wiggly in general is just the most frustrating character in the game. People always ask if you could delete one character from the game, who would it be? It's like Wiggly or Lucario to me. I hate this character. It's so ridiculously strong, obnoxious. It's just so frustrating. I don't know how else to put it. It's so incredibly frustrating and strong. Has one of the best unite moves, if not the best unite move in the game. Just one of at minimum. And yeah, just the best way to look at it. All right, let's move into Blissey. Blissey, I'm in a little bit of a weird spot, right? Because I think that same scenario is kind of true. Where like if you're playing with a friend, like if you're paired with like a 80 carry or like a Venusaur, playing Blissey is super strong. But I think, I don't know, something naturally makes me want to just like put it down here in the A tier, because the laning phase of Blissey isn't inherently that great. But the character's not bad. It just, this character absolutely relies on teammates. So again, solo duo trio, it's still really strong. I think that Blissey brings a lot to the table. But I don't know, not necessarily my go-to personally. I think you could make an argument for A+, but I'm going to leave it in A for now. All right, so my opinion of Absol is really weird. We're going to jump into speedsters here. My opinion of Absol, and this is where the like perception of strength is interesting, is that early game it's super strong, and solo queue wise that's great, right? But then you have to think like relative to what another character brings and what their strength is. So is Absol like A tier just because it's super strong early but then tapers off and isn't that good, or would it be better to run something else? So I've actually made the decision to bring Absol down from A tier where I had it previously in SOLOQ to B+, and it's not because the character got nerfed or anything. I just usually when I look at Absol versus other jungle picks or even versus some other lane picks, I just never really care to have an Absol. I don't think it scales in endgame super well. The only person that I could probably say anything about Absol like that makes it work super incredibly and impressively is like lane Absol on Chris Heroes. If y'all don't know Chris Heroes, he's a great player. So this is like I feel conflicted whenever I see other people do so well with it. But for me, I tend to want to lean a little bit more meta, like more consistent, and Absol just doesn't really give me that feeling. Zeraora is honestly in the same position. Now, here's the thing. I actually think Zeraora is way stronger than Absol. The problem with this character is that the ramp-up time is so slow. The race to level 9 for Dread is basically impossible. It takes so much experience, and then the question is, like, does the payoff of hitting 10 and getting your Unite move warrant the investment? And I like this character. Y'all have seen me make a couple of Zeraora videos recently just because I really miss the character. It's one of my favorite characters in the entire game. Super fun speedster to play, but it's really just not the best pick. It's unfortunate the position that it's in, and I think that this is one of the big Pokemon that need changes. People say, what do you want to see buffed? Zeraora, I think, needs some pretty substantial buffs. And as for Gengar, holy, here we are. Here we are in a day and age where Gengar is one of the better speedsters. Yeah, the buffs of this character, you know, it took me a while to get comfortable with this decision, to kind of keep putting this character higher and higher on the tier list, but this thing deletes, man. It doesn't scale into endgame super well, but if you can delete someone, you're gonna do solid. So Shadow Ball, Dream Meter, it's solid. The early game is honestly pretty solid coming out of jungle. You'd have to jungle this character in my opinion, but it's a very solid pick for SOLOQ. Like, you can actually just like hard snowball games. And then there's Talonflame, who is like notoriously the best speedster in the game. Easy, you can spam the Unite move. You have crazy gank pressure, crazy objective pressure. This character is actually like, I don't want to call Talonflame OP, but the things that it's good at, it's very good at. And that should not be ignored, in my opinion. So, what do we want to do next? Let's go ahead and do the tanks. Trevenant, we have the tree. Here's the thing. I know Tree got played in a tournament recently, but as far as SOLOQ goes, even solo duo trio, there's just way better options. I still really don't even have my footing on why the character is being played competitively at all by like one team. I think it's probably because they're doing like a double AD carry comp, so the Unite move is good for it. But with that being said, that you definitely don't really want that in solo duo trio. Trevenant is just so weak early. The character is actually kind of nuts, but it's super weak early. This is probably the definition of underrating the character a little bit. But I feel pretty comfortable just knowing that, relatively speaking, and since I have such a large template for my tier list, something's got to go down here. Relatively speaking, there's almost always a better pick. And speaking of some of those better picks, when it comes to tanking and hitting the laning phase, Mamoswine. I'm gonna hit a few of them right here. Mamoswine and Slowbro. No, I'm going to hit 3 of them at once so I can just clump them into this little category. And Blastoise. These characters are nuts. They're nuts for solo duo trio. Blastoise is great for SOLOQ because this character with Rapid Spin, you do a damage build, you're really solid. Slowbro, honestly, this is going to sound stupid, but you do like a kind of damagey hybrid Slowbro, you're going to bring a lot to the table, whether that's Choice Specs or Muscle Band. You're still super tanky, you're bringing CC, you have a great Unite move, and then Mamoswine is just super tanky, like really tanky, has like a really weak Unite move. It just doesn't really do a ton, but the laning phase on this character is ridiculous. And then scaling a tank into endgame is obviously amazing. So really good for duo trio. Play that with like a Ninetales or something. These other 2 tanks can go with anything. These are like the pillars of tanks for SOLOQ. Blastoise is seeing some competitive play now, which is relevant to this list, but just saying, like, the character's actually good, but has always been kind of like a high up on the list for like the SOLOQ tier list. It always has been, because it's a really good character that players themselves don't really know how to deal with. Unfortunately for Crustle competitively is like score comp only, and that's like still kind of niche. The character in SOLOQ is actually pretty good though. Like, you can run around and score a whole ton, but if you're going to pick this character, there's just a better option for doing a similar play style, or if we're doing something that brings more value. And that leads us to Greeden, which I'm still kind of just going to keep consistently putting Greeden in this S tier position. This character is a solo queue animal. It makes people confused. They don't know how to deal with it. You can invade with it. You can lane with it. I think all of the abilities that this character has. So if you're going like the Belch Covet build, that's great. You run it with a fluffy tail, stack of weight, and just do a ton of damage and steal objectives. Or you do kind of like more of a healing focus build, which I like to do. I'll run it with Potion and do Stuffed Cheeks Bullet Seed and just be really, really annoying and be ultra tanky. You kind of like achieve less objectively, but I feel like you do more fight-wise. It's weird. It's just two really different play styles, but Greeden is just consistently ridiculous. And Snorlax, this is where I feel like there's like a little bit of a hot take between, like, say, Snorlax and Trevenant. They're both relatively, like, not great, but Flaillax is actually not bad, and you have to kind of consider that. Where Trevenant is just, like, not great, like, kind of across the board. Flaillax is, like, a little bit better, and it's still a solid tank, but you have, if you're going to play Snorlax, you basically have to be trioed. So this is, like, the weird part, right? Like, because if you're playing trio, maybe, like, here... you know what I mean? Here, is this as like an actual defender? Is it any worse than Crustle? But it's just not the best option, relatively speaking. Flail, I'm probably underrating Flail. Snorlax is just a weird one to put on this list because it changes all over the place. If you're playing with people, it's not that bad, but there's always better picks. So I'm comfortably leave it at B tier. I think I did the same thing on one of my recent lists where it's just hard to place that character because his Unite move is just not that great. It just heals a ton. And I think that the character's just been kind of power crept and not really in the best position in the world. So any other tanks? Nope. That's going to be all for the tanks. All right, we'll leave the attacker list for last. Let's jump into Azumarill. So Azumarill, admittedly a little bit better than I originally thought on my first stream and my first like day of playing, but not much better. I'm kind of struggling with Azumarill's place versus some of the other all-rounders, but I think I've got a decent handle on it. I think that this character can do very well, but again, relatively speaking, it's not that much better than a lot of the other all-rounders. Now, I'm going to kind of speed round this one too, because this is just what I see for the all-rounder meta right now. And there's a slight bit of variance, and I'll explain it a little bit, but this is kind of like, this list of all-rounders that are all just like really, really solid, but like not many of them stand above the rest for me. And out of these like 5 all-rounders here, I think that Serena kind of stands above the rest a slight bit, and Dragonite stands above the rest a slight bit in its own way for being able to score a ton and having like objective pressure. So you have like objective pressure and score. You have like really good burst damage. Garchomp is just like solid, has a crazy Unite move. Aegislash does a lot, but is like not quite there. You know what I mean? Probably anybody that plays Aegislash knows that this character has a ton of potential and can do a lot and is really good. But the same could be said about Azumarill. It's got presence. It's got that spammable Unite move. It has the ability to like pick somebody off. It's good. I think Azumarill's like okay, but it's just not the best. Originally I was saying I think this character's like bottom 3, bottom 5, like 4 or 5 character in the game. I do still kind of think that, like if I was to put it like down here, I do still think it's on the weaker spectrum. It's on the underwhelming side of the roster. But this is where I have to start comparing it to like other picks. So like laning picks, it's probably better than anything that could be down here. Jungle picks, it's probably better than these couple other speedsters. As far as comparing it to some of these other all-rounders, I think that they're all relatively similar in value that could be earned by them, but they just do slightly different things. So that's where I kind of see these 5 all-rounders. The all-rounder class is pretty solid, to be completely honest. And honestly, being an A tier is pretty solid. You can win this. You can win games with this character. I just don't think it's the strongest thing in the world. Now, this is still a little hot take-ish, I think. But I'm putting Lucario in S tier consistently. The character's not the best in solo queue. It definitely does way better in 5 stacks. But the character is actually still just so ridiculous. It just feels like whatever build you're playing too, like E-Speed, crazy, like Bone Rush E-Speed, Pup, Close Combat is still good. It just is such a silly character, man. It has so much mobility. It feels so unpunishable. It doesn't have to worry about like getting stuck at like it's like certain levels for evolutions. It is just so incredibly strong. Now this is where I'm making a slight change. I think that I keep consistently putting like Machamp under it, but I think Machamp scales into endgame better than Lucario does. So I'm also gonna bring up Machamp to S tier. Now my S tier, I kind of used to be a little bit more conservative with it. I'm being a little bit more open with the S tier, where I want to show off a lot of good picks, like some of the best of the game, and that's where I'm at with it. As for Charizard, incredibly solid, one of the best junglers in the game, still kind of, and has been for a while now, which is great for Charizard. It's hard to carry games with this, but like, again, solo, duo, trio, man, Charizard is just an animal in the jungle. Definitely a really, really solid pick. Scales phenomenally. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of the all-rounders. This is the part right here where I'd love to hear your thoughts about these all-rounders right here, because I think we could go up or down a little bit with some of them, but none of them truly stand above the rest to me too much. Like, if I had to like slightly lean some things, you know what I mean? Like, maybe it would look like that, but you get the point. These 5 all-rounders are solid picks, but maybe just not the best in the entire game, as far as, you know, something like that goes. So, all right, let's hit the attacker tree now. Raladon. I think Raladon is still very, very strong. It brings that objective pressure at range. It's not the crazy broken version of itself, but for solo queue, duo queue, trio queue, really, really strong. I think it's kind of like lost its flavor a little bit in competitive, because it's a little bit easier to deal with. Doesn't quite have that same burst, but solo queue, it's still just hard flips objectives and it's super annoying. Sylveon's solid, but it's a little on the weaker end, right? Like, it's not the weakest character in the game by any means. But, you know, it could use some buffs. I just want to see this character get buffed and see some love to it, because it's a great character to play. And then you have Alolan Ninetales, who got buffed and then got nerfed and is still amazing. We have our solid laning attackers. Let's go on ahead and get them out of the way here. Solid laning attackers. Like, you cannot go wrong playing these attackers. Pikachu, spammable Unite move, amazing laning phase. Ninetales, amazing laning phase. Scales pretty solid into the end game. And then Venusaur, like, kind of an okay laning phase that scales tremendously well into late game. I've been kind of iffy about Venusaur. It feels like it hasn't been as good as it used to feel, but it's still incredibly strong. So no complaints there. And then our jungle, like well, not the one I'm looking for. Our jungle pick for SP attacker is Gardevoir. I think Gardevoir's still incredibly strong, so you can't go wrong picking Gardevoir for jungle. It can lane-ish, right? Like, I'm never gonna say it's the worst laner in the world, but it can lane-ish, but really, really solid character. Now, Greninja, S tier design for this character. Cinderace, S tier attacker. These two attackers are the ones that just scale. They scale and scale and scale. You get fed on these characters, the game is sometimes just over, as long as your teammates show up for things and you can get stuff done. So solo, duo, trio, competitive, it doesn't matter. Cinderace, Greninja, they're amazingly solid picks, and you just can't go wrong with them. They're super strong. They have amazing Unite moves. They have it all. They have it all. And last but not least, well, actually not last but not least, we have one other, Decidueye. Now, I genuinely hate this character in solo queue, but I can't deny the fact that it's not way better than it used to be. If I'm being honest, myself wants to put this character here, but I do think that it's stronger than that now. And I like to speak about the strength of the character. That's how I do things with like other classes, because it's not just solo queue. If you're playing with people, especially if you're playing with people, this character is pretty strong. Spirit Shackle got some nice buffs. The Unite move got some nice buffs. I'm going to throw it an A+ tier. I still feel like you just have to be good at this character. You have to get good positioning, but it's the same thing with Gardevoir. Like, you have to just position so well with these characters that have like really long range, to the point where like you're not just getting wiped out instantly. And it is strong. I've been playing it a lot more recently to try to get my footing on it, to say like, how do I actually feel about this character? I would probably rather have a Decidueye than like a Sylveon on my team, probably. As long as it's a good one, and that's what we got to think about it. And as for Cram, boom. Cram is the worst character in the game now, which is super sad, but it's true. I don't know. Character needs some love, but that's what I'm thinking. I know, like I said, I've kind of stacked my A tier, but the balance of this game, and I've said this before, I think I said it on like a YouTube comment recently, the balance of Unite is actually pretty good. Like, the majority of things are balanced pretty well. There's not many characters that feel truly useless, and this is mirror match meta. Like, you can play, realistically, you can win games with anything because of the nature of the game, but like A+, and S tier, if you pick anything in those categories, you're doing just fine. A is kind of where it's like, you should probably pick A plus and up, but like you can do solid with. B plus and down, it's like, I really wouldn't pick them much unless you're just having fun. Like when I pick Zeraora, it's because I want to have fun, not because I'm trying to win the game as much as I could if I was trying to play something else. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, especially around the all-rounders. Like I'm really curious because a tier list, you're kind of forced to structure it in a way like this, and maybe I could structure it left to right, but I'm too lazy to do that. So like I said, I'm kind of leaning something like this, you know what I mean, where like I pick Serena up, she's leaning like A plus tier, Azumarill is like leaning slightly on the B plus side, Garchomp, Aegislash, and Dragonite, they're all just like super solid. So like I said, let me know your thoughts, friends. As always, I appreciate all the support. Drop a like on the video if you wouldn't mind. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I think I still have like somewhere around that like 50% range of y'all, or like 45% of y'all are not subscribed to the channel. So I do appreciate you. Appreciate all the support. As always, be sure to be kind to one another. Tell someone you love them. And I'll see you on the next video.